single item, consideration of heritage deregistration of the Canterbury Motor Home, known as the Hahn property, located at 4956 Nova Scotia Trunk 3, Meredith's Cove. And yeah, Mr. Lamy, you're satisfied this is properly before us?
Yes, I am, regretfully, Mr. Warden.
No, I regret too. Nevertheless, this is what life is like.
Yeah.
Okay, so overview by the planner.
Yeah, so Emily has meant to be here, but she was stuck in that accident, or the traffic as a result of the accident on the 103. So I'll do my best to give a quick little overview here. So of course, we're all familiar with the property and the ongoing efforts to restore it. Essentially, what we've, as we've heard from Mr. Hutton, that it's gotten to a point that it's not salvageable. And so in order to sort of move forward with the use of the property that we have been really successful with the trails and all kinds of other things, deregistration and ultimately demolition are the next steps that we're looking at. So as outlined in the report here, there is a process to go through deregistration of municipal heritage property, basically on application of the owner. So we are the owner, but we've made an application to do so, and the staff report goes through that. Essentially, in the case that the property, or in this case, the reason is that the property has been, well, not destroyed, but damaged, and is beyond salvaging, essentially. There are some stipulations that can't be due to neglect or abandonment, and I think we have a strong case to make that that's not the case. We inherited the property in a pretty bad state of disrepair. We made many efforts, different types of efforts to maintain the property, and then also, through Mr. Hutton to potentially save it. Ultimately, that was unsuccessful, and as a result, in the meantime, the property has gotten even worse. So essentially, that is the reasoning for the deregistration, and there are a few options here, which is essentially the first is to pass a motion to deregister the property, which will set us up, and Public Works will follow up with sort of demolition discussions in future
meetings. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any comments so far from the council? Comments from the public? Hearing none. What is the wish of council?
I'll move that we deregister the property.
Seconder? Okay. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. There being no further business, a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. So we'll move on to, I'll call it Committee of the Whole or Council? Council. Committee on my emails, it said Committee of the Whole. So I'm just making sure. I'll call the council meeting to order. And of course, the first item is the approval of agenda order of business. And I have one change, and that's to move 9.4 Church Memorial Park request to in camera. I have some information that I need to share. And that's it for me, I think.
I'll move we approve the agenda as amended.
Seconder?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, public input, I'm unaware of any. No, I don't know. I don't see anybody with a hand up or anything like that. So, minutes of the previous meeting, errors or omissions.
Motion to approve, second.
Second. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. I know you get a lot of paper there, so I'm having a little trouble keeping track of all. Proclamations and designations, I don't know of any.
No.
Committee reports, Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program monthly report.
Circulated in packet.
Yes, it is circulated in the package, so if everybody's happy with that, we'll move on. REMAC Committee.
Remo Advisory.
Oh, it says REMAC here.
It's a Regional Emergency Management Advisory Committee, so that's, yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's the same as this REMO.
Same, yes.
We do have a letter here from that committee, which was the most significant thing that took place. That the upset funds allocated to the new emergency management coordinator position be provided back to partner municipalities at year end, and that further the remaining budgeted funds be kept, which is just a small, that's the regular business. Yeah, but there was discussion and essentially that it wouldn't take place until fall at best. And now I think there are some, although not formally at the meeting, but some informal discussions taking place about possibly taking a look at that whole process and the way it works and whether or not that position will be filled this fiscal year or not, so.
Okay. So are we getting the full amount back or just partial?
At this point in time, that's the recommendation, that's what they're saying right now, but it may in turn work out to be more.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not the issue. You open the door, I'm gonna go through it. So,
Well, I mean,
the issue is that there's two issues. The first issue is that we have probably for a long time within our municipal units neglected to prepare for emergencies properly by staffing and dealing with them appropriately, because the responsibility for responding to emergencies lies with the councils, individual councils, not an agency. And what we appointed many years ago was a coordinator to coordinate our efforts. So we were all to have our emergency management procedures in place and all of the infrastructure you need to respond to emergencies, and then we had a coordinator. Well, for many years, we didn't actually, probably weren't staffing appropriately. And, you know, we had a coordinator putting in 12 or 13 hours a week and doing strictly coordination. And if there were emergencies, maybe we would have been caught flat-footed. Luckily, we didn't have any serious ones. Then we have a new coordinator come in, and obviously, I think she identified that there are many things that weren't being done, like who's doing contingency plans with Shoreham Village, who's reaching out to all these Maybach or any of these other facilities we have to make sure that there's emergency plans, who's doing all that work that normally would be done by municipal units? Nobody. So she started doing it. We were quite happy to let her do it. And then at some point she became overwhelmed with the amount of work she was doing, because she was doing all of our work. And then we actually had some emergencies, and I think that highlighted how it could be possible that we would be underprepared. So we reacted to two things. We reacted to an employee of Remo that was supposed to be a coordinator, that was actually doing a manager job of managing all of our work. And we reacted to some emergencies, and we started saying, well, what do we have to do to fix this? And I guess at the committee level this happened, and a decision was made to invest in Remo. But by doing that, you're creating an agency. You're creating a central body that actually manages your emergencies instead of the original intent, which was to have all of the units be able to respond to emergencies and then to coordinate together. That was the way it was originally set up. And none of our councils actually had that debate, whether that's how we wanted to do it. None of us ever talked about it, and in fact, the committee didn't talk about it. And I think it happened organically. Maybe it didn't cross anybody's mind because we were reacting to emergencies that were happening, and we thought, okay, we've got to fix this. But there were more than one way to fix it, and nobody had that debate. Whether, you know, should we have staff for the amount of money we're paying? We could have an additional staff person here. that actually corresponds with Shoreham and does all the things that would be local to here from an emergency standpoint, rather than from Bridgewater. No debate has ever been held. So now we're confronted with hiring another staff person in Remo, and now we're starting down the path of creating an agency that basically does everything for us from an emergency standpoint. And I'm sure from the CAO's perspective, selfishly, that would be the best. It's all handled, and you just show up and you've got some training and you do what's required of you. That's easiest. But is it best? I don't know, because we haven't talked about it. So that's, I think, the grievance. It's not about $20,000 that we might get back because they were late hiring some person on. That's not the issue at all. That doesn't even come close to being the issue. The issue is that we haven't actually been thoughtful about how we're going to do emergency management, and we haven't thought strategically about how we're going to roll out emergency management in our region. It's all been reaction, and it hasn't been discussed, and that's the issue. And it's further compounded because our representatives didn't bring any information back to us, so we didn't even have a chance to talk about it here. So that's the issue. You brought it up.
I didn't know that. What's on the agenda?
So here we go.
Anyone else, any comments? Okay, thank you.
Oh, any comment I will make, because I think Andre, I'm not just going to let him stay out there. What he's saying is absolutely true. So I don't want silence to be misinterpreted. I totally agree with Andre's position.
Yes, I'll jump on as well. I'm being too quiet here. I'm similar to Derek, and I think that wouldn't be a surprise because we've chatted about this before. And Abdullah, you'll agree, and others, so agree. Thank you, Andre, for your words.
And I think there needs to be further discussion, but it's not today. It needs to be with the whole group as how we're going to move forward.
What bothers me is that the Remo group is now proceeding with hiring this person, and it's sort of locking in this agency model by hiring additional staff. And I think that's detrimental to the partnership that we have in Remo, because I think that there is some vague understanding and the Remo advisory group that we're discontented. They don't seem to understand, from what I can gather, why we're upset. And they're continuing on, and what they're doing is solidifying this adversarial position where we're like, whoa guys, like we should be talking about this because this is the bigger, more strategic discussion than just hiring a person. And they're proceeding and they're galvanizing us against them.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem.
I think they're prepared to have a broader discussion.
My understanding is that our next Remo meeting, are we going to have that discussion with Paul Williams? Isn't that what we talked about?
I haven't had that discussion. I have heard that that's
going to happen.
That's informally being considered.
Yeah,
Yes.
to have a full discussion, and you're on that committee, so if you want to take part in those discussions the next Remo meeting, you're part of the Remo committee, so you should be there.
Okay.
Well, the ad's up.
Pardon?
The ad's up for this other person.
So
I can't say they're not proceeding, they're proceeding. And
My understanding is that they're proceeding with a 6-month position right now for this year.
My understanding is also that may come up for consideration.
Yes.
Public presentations, I'm again not aware of that. Notice of 8.1, notice of intention, financial information services, procurement policy.
Morning, Council. So what I have for you here is a request for decision to make some amendments to policy P04, that's the procurement policy. This is part of the bigger multi-year process of updating our procurement practices. So we've already gone through with the e-procurement platform, the new procurement cards, implementing the purchase order module. There will still be a final, more fulsome revamp of this policy to come in a year or two. However, given the current, well, you've all passed a record-setting capital budget for this year. We've accepted some funding from the Housing Accelerator Fund that requires certain operational procurement activities, so we've seen a huge surge in the procurement function. This is something that you've all addressed recently with the creation of the new procurement officer position as well. And so what I'm presenting to you today is what we would call a few quick hit or changes to the policy that are proposed in order to alleviate a lot of the bottlenecks around the procurement function so that we can meet the requirements of the things that we've set about to do in a way that is achievable with the resources that we have. I'm going to go through, I'll start with the discussion section, just kind of go through what the changes are. So that you can kind of be aware of exactly what it is we're proposing to change here. So the first thing is the thresholds. So these thresholds were set in the current policy at $25,000 for goods. These are the high value procurement thresholds, I should say. $50,000 for services and $100,000 for construction. These are quite low by current standards. They were set quite a while ago and they are fixed, right? So they don't change as times change and costs change. What we are proposing here is to align our policy with the Canadian Free Trade Agreement under the MASH sector, so that's municipalities, academic institutions, school boards, and health authorities. So right now the thresholds for that sector is goods and services, the high value threshold is $133,800, and for construction it is $334,400. Now the policy as presented here does not hard code those numbers. It references the thresholds set under the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, and that's what those are now. So if we were to approve as amended, those thresholds would be revised every 2 years. They take an opportunity to look at those thresholds. So we would not need to come back and revise the policy every time those come, if they change. However, it would be informed council to let you know that these are the changes that are coming in. So of course this allows for more flexibility on the procurement side. It allows for more opportunity to engage local vendors with invitational procurement options for the lower value thresholds. Another change we're presenting here is to make it more clear when and how to use existing standing offers. So that would include federal, provincial standing offers, as well as the use of the 2 buying groups that we are a member of. These are cooperative groups, Canoe Procurement and Kinetic GPO. The current policy stipulates that those can only be used for low value. However, that is not the intention of those standing offers. They do exist so that we can leverage and therefore not duplicate the efforts of the open procurement processes that have been established or that have been gone through to establish these standing offers. So there are some changes in the wording and how and when we can use the standing offers. That is because these standing offers have been established through an open procurement process. We can say, okay, that part of our procurement requirement has already been done, so we don't have to dedicate our own internal resources to doing that again if there are appropriate and reasonable offers available. The third real change that we're presenting here is about the approval of the award of the open tender process. Our current policy requires that all open tenders come back to council for approval of the award. This is not the general practice. It slows things down quite a lot, and we're proposing changing that to a more accepted and common method of it will come back to council for award in certain situations. However, not if it's something that was approved for budget, was approved by scope, we've gone through the approved process, and the winner is the winner. We can just award those contracts, either the department heads or the CAO.
Things outside of the budget.
With the exception of if it's more than 10% over a budget on a high value item, if there's a legislative or contractual requirement for council to approve, if the contract were to exceed 5 years, or if there were any other reason that the CAO felt that there was a need for council to weigh in on those awards. Some other more minor changes where we updated some of the definitions to include just better understandability for the document. We readjusted the order of some of the alternative procurement practices, and that is not changing the substance of it, it's just realigning it to align with the provincial standards or the reporting requirements that we have on that. Section 8.0, was removed. It included 2 sections on cooperative procurement and standing offers. Those pieces are now covered under 4.1, cooperative procurement. And Appendix 2, procurement tools, has been updated just to reflect the current existing RFX documents, so the request for proposals, for quotes, for information. And then just in general, we've made some changes to correct grammar, capitalization, that type of thing. So the options that we have for you today are to approve or to pass, what's the wording, Pam? Intention?
It's give notice.
Give notice of intention to adopt the amended policy. Yeah. Or you could reject and request further information, or you could approve with specific amendments that you'd like to make today.
Okay, thank you. Comments?
Makes sense to me.
Andre?
The only thing I guess I would have some concern about is contracts that exceed 5 years. 5 years is a long time. It exceeds a council term. Or if I had my druthers, just, it would be more like a 3-year term would be sort of like where I would want to see that cap. At least it keeps it within a council term.
Yeah. I actually agree with that. A good start, I actually agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course we could pass.
Well, that's a minor adjustment.
Very minor, yeah.
So are the rest comfortable with changing that to 3?
Yeah.
Somebody want to move that we give notice of intention to amend with that adjustment?
So moved.
Seconder?
You want me to read the?
I do not need you to read it.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay. Notice of intention. Oh, that's the one I just did. Village of Chester Secondary Planning Strategy. That's this relatively large document.
Pardon, sorry?
I said that's relatively large document in case anybody can find it.
Yeah. Right in the middle, right in the middle of the agenda. Okay, what we have included in the package is the copy of what we're calling the final draft, or the June 20th draft of the new secondary planning strategy and land use bylaw. And if council is satisfied with the current draft, we would be potentially looking for a first reading today and to talk about setting dates for public hearing and that kind of thing. But given that we were considering it for first reading, I did feel that an overview would be good. I'll try to keep it relatively brief and touch on some of the items.
If you read that whole thing, we'll be here until 3 days.
And certainly if there's questions, obviously there's a ton of stuff in the documents that's not in the slides I'm going to go through. So if there are any questions on specifics, I'll be happy to answer that. So just quickly as a bit of background, so we've been working on this plan since 2020. Following up on the completion of the municipal plan review, we were intending to update the plan and protect the look and feel of the village and maintain a consistent style and approach with the municipal planning strategy in terms of how the document itself is laid out. We also wanted to deal with sort of new and emerging issues that had cropped up since 2004 and then update and review some regulations that we thought were well-intentioned but maybe could be more effective. So the next slide is just an overview of some of the public engagement. This is obviously not everything, but these are sort of the major events that we did, starting in 2020 with some pop-ups. Household survey was a major part in 2021 that went to every household in the village and had a variety of topics. And then as we've moved through the years here, last year and this year have been more focused on public meetings when we actually had a draft of the documents to release and discuss specific provisions and policies. Just to quickly touch on the secondary plan itself, so that is the secondary planning strategy, subservient to our municipal planning strategy, but it has policies dealing really with just the village area. So we use what we call a character area approach. So there are 3 character areas, and essentially what that means is within each character area, there's a series of zones that are permitted, and so you could consider rezoning within any of those character areas to other zones in the same character area without needing to change the overall secondary planning strategy. We also have introduced some what we call overlays in the plan. So the lakefront overlay, which council will be familiar with from the municipal side, we're just bringing that in. It's basically a portion of Stanford Lake that would apply to. We have some, we've carried forward some protections, but kind of hopefully made them more recognizable around the Old Stone Bridge overlay. So we have that mapped in terms of areas where special reports are needed to confirm that there's not going to be any structural damage to the bridge as a result of development. And then we also have what we call a core village and outer village overlay, and that's used sort of in reference to the architectural controls to speak about the core village being where the strongest controls apply and the outer village being where lesser controls apply. In the secondary plan, it is kind of the visionary document, so we have some, there's some statements of purpose and vision and goals. There's shared goals with the municipal plan, but there's also some specific goals for the village, some of which are outlined here, essentially that the existing village character is the primary point of reference for new development. So when you think back to the FBM architectural study that we had done and all of that work to try to capture what the village is and outline those rules through our architectural controls that we've introduced in the plan. The secondary plan also has a number of policies that touch on a whole bunch of other municipal initiatives. So there's, you can see the list here. It's quite extensive, but there are policies in there that kind of tie this document to other initiatives and plans and studies that the municipality is undertaking. And then the secondary plan also goes through the zones, which are on the next slide here. And so this is just sort of a showing from the current zones on the left, new zones on the right, and you'll see in many cases the name is changing. In a few cases, we've got a couple of new zones that are proposed, and I'll go through most of those zones quickly here just to give you a brief overview of what they entail. Now jumping into the land use bylaw, so this is the rules and regulations. Yep. So one important part of the bylaw is the general provisions. There are all kinds of matters dealt with in the general provisions that affect the entire document in all zones. So I'm not going to go through them all, but just a couple important ones, and something that is new in this plan being an accessory dwelling unit. So accessory dwelling units are permitted in all residential zones up to 1 per lot. They're limited to 100 meters in floor area, so that's about 1,000 square feet. You need to provide 1 additional parking space. And the unit can either be in an accessory structure, sort of in the backyard, or it could be as like a basement apartment or a loft in the main building. If it is in the main building, there are some requirements that the entrance to the second unit has to be tucked around the side or the back. The intention there is to promote the look of a single unit from the street to maintaining that existing character being one of those initial points of reference. Another important part of the general provisions are the architectural and design controls. So we had a series of existing architectural controls, which again, through the help of our consultant FBM, we reviewed those and updated them, brought in some new ones, got rid of some. A couple of ones that come up quite often are height. So the height limit has been slightly tweaked in this plan to allow slightly taller buildings in certain circumstances. Essentially, if the roof pitch is quite steep, then there is an allowance to go up, and the table here outlines the different pitch categories and the height. We've also slightly tweaked how we measure height, so we now go from the peak of the roof to the average, basically the average grade. So if you're building on a hill, it will hopefully encourage folks to build with the topography rather than cut in and terrace and create a flat area before they develop. Continuing on with the architectural and design controls, so we have actually carrying forward a requirement that buildings over 1,500 square feet in footprint need to have varied massing. So basically, it needs to be broken up through porches or L's or other design elements, so it's not just a big rectangular block. We've introduced some requirements on the amount of window area, and that is specifically looking to avoid some development that we've seen that was not well received, that was a very modern look of metal framing with all glass walls, essentially. We have now prohibited metal siding, although metal roofing is allowed. And then we've also got, through I think one of the last times we were debating this here, we were also prohibiting vinyl siding, as well as fake stone or faux stone, and then unfinished concrete and concrete blocks. So those are sort of the materials that are a no-go if you're within the architectural area. We've introduced some new regulations for attached garages, a prohibition on a single slope or a shed roof. So that's essentially where the slope, there's no peak in the middle. It's just going one way, and again, it's kind of more of a modern look and not something that you see traditionally here in the village. We've introduced, or we've carried forward a maximum height for accessory structures of 6 meters, which is roughly 20 feet, and we've introduced a roof pitch for accessory structures of 4 and 12. So you'd no longer to be able to build a flat roofed accessory structure. We've also added some language to incorporate landscaping and regulate the use of aggregate or stone as a replacement for lawn, gardens, shrubs, trees, the sort of traditional kind of landscaping elements that we would see in the village. So moving on to the character areas and the zones. So the first character area that we'll talk about is the village core and peninsula area. So this is the historic center of the village, as well as the 3 surrounding peninsulas. They're well-established neighborhoods in most areas, and then of course our traditional commercial core on Pleasant, Queen, and Duke. The new plan allows for some growth in this area, while intending or attempting to maintain the traditional scope, scale, and feel of the area. So this is the map here. So the area we're talking about now is the purplish blue, the village core and peninsula. And within that character area, there are five zones. So there's the residential 1 zone, residential 2, core commercial, marine development, and the waterfront zone. And so I'll quickly touch on each of those. So the residential 1 zone is what used to be the estate residential zone. So the name has changed, but relatively the same in terms of where it occurs. As council may recall, there was a pretty heated debate on reducing the minimum lot size in that area. So we've returned that back to the existing 40,000 square feet. So that is as it was. We have introduced a maximum lot coverage in that zone to reflect the existing sort of the way that most of those lots are developed currently. And basically that they're large lots and it's not completely covered in buildings. There's large yards and setbacks. And we've also introduced a maximum footprint and gross floor area, as you see at the bottom here, for new structures in that zone. And again, that is in response to some comments that we've had around particular developments that we're seeing, even in a zone that traditionally supports large homes. We've heard comments about some being just too big. Yeah, so that's a new rule there. In the residential 2 zone, so this was previously the Central Village residential zone, so that would be the zone that primarily would surround these properties here at the municipal office. So we have made a slight change here. Currently in that zone, you can do 1 2-unit dwelling per block, and then any home that's older than 2004 could be converted to a 2-unit dwelling. To clarify that, we've removed those and we've said that every lot can support a 2-unit dwelling. Effectively, that's not too far off of what was possible before, but it clarifies it and it doesn't tie the age of the home to that 2004. The vast majority are older than 2004 anyway, so effectively, most homes under the current plan could be converted, and under the new plan, we're just saying that every lot is potentially able to do that. We have added a maximum footprint of main buildings in this zone, as you'll see in the chart at the bottom right, Yeah, I think that's about it. And again, the footprint sizes and the lot coverage provisions primarily came through the FBM consultant. They analyzed the existing footprints of developments in the village versus the lot sizes, and that's how these numbers came. Yeah, and it's essentially meant to reflect the average of what we have now. Yeah, the norm. So next is the core commercial zone. So this is in place along Pleasant Street and out Duke, and then along Valley connecting out to Highway 3. So you'll see there's a wide variety of commercial uses here, similar to what's permitted in the current plan. In terms of changes here, we've added a few uses, or we've moved a few uses under the development agreement category. So like the beverage room and lounges would go through a development agreement, and tourist accommodations as well. Let me see if there's anything. I think that's... the other notable piece in that zone is we have removed the requirement for on-site parking for commercial uses. So we're hopeful that will allow expansion and potentially new development of some unused space in some of the buildings in that zone that might be limited by the number of on-site parking spots that they can provide.
Which that exists.
Yeah, that's right. So next, we'll move to the marine development zone, and I'll pause here for a little bit because, of course, this has been the zone that's been discussed most recently at the last time this was at council. What you'll see here, this is a replacement for the marine industrial zone that currently exists for basically Stevens Boatyard and the Heisler Boatyard, as well as another property in between. So the marine development zone is intended to replace that zone. It will also apply to the rope loft properties on Front Harbor, so we've sort of expanded where the zone is covering. But there has been a lot of public pushback on any changes to this zone, and specifically around concerns around wedding venues, restaurants, and tourist accommodations in the zone. So where we landed here, or what's coming back as my recommendation, is as you see it here. So we have marine-related commercial uses by development permit. Marine-related light industrial uses will be allowed, but only on the lots that's currently allowed on. So basically the boatyard properties. So you wouldn't be able to do industrial out at the rope loft, for example. That's right. We've also added now, at the request of residents, that only the rope loft would be able to have a restaurant. So there's no ability to do a restaurant back there now. That's been clearly made through policy. And we've listed the existing residential uses in the LUB. So this zone there's a lot going on in this zone. It is very specific. It does a lot, and it's been asked to do a lot. It's not ideal to have all these specific, on this lot you can do this, but over here you can do this, but over here you can do that, and you can't do this here. But
that's the will of the public.
Primarily, they're not all happy. There are a few who are still not, but the majority, when we had that meeting with the residents and the boatyard owners, all but one were in agreement with where we landed. So, and so in particular here, tourist accommodations are allowed 1 unit per 325 meters squared of lot area. That is about 3,500 square feet, and so that was a big part of the discussion, was how there was concern that there would be a hotel built down there, which was not the intent. So we added a new definition for a tourist accommodation unit and changed the definitions anyway, a lot of work there. I'm confident you can't build a hotel there except as envisioned. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to go through that, but otherwise I think we'll just move on. Yeah.
Just a couple questions. Is it possible to build, if you were to own these properties, would it be possible to build a tourist accommodations without doing the marine component?
Yep, absolutely. It can be done as a standalone, just through development agreement. Yeah, as long as you have the lot area. Basically, the lot area determines how many units you can apply for, and then it would go through the development.
I feel like that could be a weakness, because I think we want to preserve the marine use for this zone. It'd be nice if if, for example, a development agreement came forward requesting tourist accommodations, that it was a requirement that they have marine services as well. I would hate for this these properties to be purchased and then the marine use, which is actually right in the name, disappeared and it became just tourist accommodations.
Part of the problem here, and one of the reasons we went through this process is that all the owners agreed that the way it was set up was not economically viable. Couldn't support, I mean, the taxes they pay just are much higher because of waterfront. And they needed some flexibility to be able to make it viable.
I'm 100% on side there. I'm just saying that if we were going to bring the tourist accommodations on, I think that you should also have to have the marine component as well. You would hate to lose that and then only have tourist accommodations and nothing else.
What type of marine development?
Like a marina service or some sort of, to me, if it's a marine development zone and we zone it as such and then it changes ownership and those new owners aren't interested in boats, they shouldn't just build tourist accommodations to whatever limits they can without any marine component. To me, that should be a requirement of the zone that you actually have to offer some marine services. You can still do the residential part as suggested here. I just don't see why we would want to let. To me, that's the purpose of the zone.
Where were the people that you met with on that issue?
It was, again, the zone's trying to do so much for everybody.
No.
That comment was expressed, that it would be a shame to lose the marine uses. The neighbors, to be frank, I mean, the owners of the boatyards are concerned with having, or are looking for new opportunities, basically. And the neighbors are concerned with basically having as little, get up to block their views or get at their water. It's the same concerns, density, it's the same thing we've been hearing all along. So they don't want much, and the boatyard owners want a lot, it's totally understandable.
I don't think this is a big ask though, it's just saying that, you should have floating docks and things like that if you're gonna develop this property.
Yeah, and if that's council's desire, we could tie that in, like either, we have, for example, we have in the core commercial zone, we say, residential units up to 4 in a building that also contains a commercial use. So we could look at something like that to say tourist accommodations associated with a marine use or a marina use, I guess. That's possible if that's. And it's a discussion too as to the desire to keep that marine zone go. Again, it's tricky because it's trying to meet so many.
Do you know what the policy says that establishes the marine development zones?
Oh yeah, pull that up.
Because if it's referenced in the policy, that would give you the policy direction to do that.
So the policy goal is to maintain connection with and opportunity for the historical working relationship with the ocean, including fishing, shipbuilding, and repair, to provide limited opportunities for commercial uses on the waterfront that will enhance and create a vibrant community by providing recreational opportunities for residents and visitors, and to designate portions of the waterfront as being appropriate for marine-related light industrial and limited commercial uses. Those are the goals, and then we have quite a number of policies.
I just feel like in some future council, if this request comes in by VA, then they should know that you shouldn't be approving a development that doesn't include those goals.
Yeah, and
you shouldn't be able to get that without that.
Yeah,
Because what you could do is put something in the policy that you'll consider tourist accommodations that contain,
right,
or when they contain, and that could be part of your policy consideration when you're doing the DA.
Yeah, and that's the debate. Do we want to do that or not?
Derek.
Sam was trying to say something.
No, I'm just saying, I sort of agree with Andre, but it's very difficult to be very specific. I think what Tara was saying is a good idea, that if it's part of the policy consideration,
just part of the consideration,
then the council would have some influence or say whether they approve or not. At least say some floating docks available not just for the tourists, but for other people.
Right.
That was a
So
second.
not the public.
Not necessarily, none of them are for the public, but they were for rental to the public.
Oh, yeah, they can do that.
Yeah.
If they choose.
Yeah, well, that's what they do now. You know, anybody has to go to rent.
I was gonna ask about how.
Well, it's Tina's
So,
turn.
yeah, no, I just don't know, because I don't know if we're tying the hands of the property owners too much. I just don't know, because it's not come up so far in terms of what the property owners have brought forward.
Well, the property owners, they know it's a marine zone, and that the intention is to have some marine activity there. And I think the comments, if we can tie it into policy or whatever, I think they'd be happy with that. I don't see that would be a problem.
Well, it doesn't restrict their ability to put tourist cottages.
No, it would just be looking to maintain some element of
Less
marine.
alone.
Yeah.
Adding something, and what you're saying, Andre, you pick up that we may be eliminating something we don't want to eliminate.
No, you don't want to.
So I think it's a good compromise.
So, again, my statement still is, I don't know where the property owners themselves would land, and with all due respect, Eric, right? I just
No,
don't
I
know.
understood, yeah.
And I know that that's important to me in terms of listening to everybody, including the property owners in terms of timelines. So I just wanted to make that statement, thank you.
We had fulsome meetings with them, a number of occasions. Very intense.
But wholesome.
What do you think this change
I
would
think,
later?
I do believe that will be accepted based on the comments I've heard.
Okay, well, that's what's important.
That what Derek had said?
Do you agree with that, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I quite frankly, I'm at a loss with this zone right now, if you want my honest opinion. Seriously, I wouldn't want to speak for anybody.
Yeah.
This one has taken me to the edge. But so just to be clear, so in that policy, does it have to be marine industrial or just a marine use, like?
I think we just don't want to lose our connection to the ocean.
Yep. So no, so absolutely, so we can
It
add
doesn't have to be industrial.
say that tourist,
It's just consideration that we will take into it.
well, once we put it in there, it's in there. So then we're gonna be looking to see we're gonna be turning it down if it doesn't have a marine component. Doesn't mean it has to be of any particular scale, but they have to have something to satisfy that policy, just like
Maybe it
other.
could just be floating docks.
Yes, yeah.
I would see somebody
You could make a case.
wanting to
Well, I
stay
can't
there,
imagine them not putting floating docks in right on the ocean anyway.
but, you know,
Well, that's what the roll-off dock is, basically, floating docks. They don't provide other stuff, as far as I know, other stuff.
You can rent it out if you want to.
Okay, so we will, we'll add
Andre, did you have more?
Just one little thing.
Sure.
Like in some jurisdictions, like when they create policy, say for housing, for example, like if it were, they'll offer density bonuses if housing developments have certain numbers of low-income sort of like offerings in their proposed structures or whatever. And for our residents, generally they value the connection to the ocean. So is there any opportunity to allow a little bonus in these accommodations or some sort of incentive to give these property owners that if they were to give a public access? So like if you could get a density bonus if you put a boardwalk in or did something like that. I mean, these are the sorts of things that some jurisdictions do to promote like the regional goals.
I think if we make that kind of change, then we need to go back to the group again, because that wasn't discussed.
I would guess that I know I just said I wasn't going to speak for anybody, I'm not, but I would guess that the neighbors would be opposed to that, because their whole thing is they don't want more traffic, they don't want more people down there. Tremont Street is quiet, and so even building public infrastructure to attract more people would probably be something that at least a portion of them would oppose.
Yeah.
Not that that means that we don't do it, but that
It's tight down there, I mean, parking's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, you put a lot of effort into this, and I guess I don't want to hold the job you have.
well, and I'm not sure with a new policy. I don't know if we can give it first reading. I don't know. I'm not sure. Not having it's a whole new policy. It's not really I mean, it's a minor change, but it's not a minor change. So if we're gonna make one, we could make more than one, I guess.
Yeah, I know, but
So I guess, Sam, would it be, if the goal of the zone is stated in policy already, and you're just adding a policy to further support that, would that be a significant change that we could do first reading?
How long would it take very long to come up with some wording for this new policy?
No, probably not.
Could you just adjourn this, put it on
The end of the agenda?
the agenda?
Yeah.
And then we would have
Do that.
wording for the new policy.
when, at the end of the day?
Yeah.
That's just to have a consideration for public access or.
Well, no, so sorry, this was, so the one we've agreed on so far was the marine, tying it to the marine use, and then the second item would be the.
Just leave it at that.
Well, that's council's decision whether they, yeah.
I think that change would be fairly, I think it would be
Yeah.
straightforward, and then you could have that document for the end of the
But
year.
allowing public boardwalks and things like that is getting, that's going far.
I think that would create
Well, then you
too
start,
much.
whatever.
People would want to discuss that a lot more, public.
And I think if
boardwalks.
council wanted to do something like that, that could be a further amendment later on.
Later on,
That's
yeah.
something you could put on the list of things too.
Okay, so we'll take that one addition, which I will,
Just the one, not the second.
go work on. Yep. Okay, so just continuing on here. So next, so this is the zoning map, just so we've gone through a couple of the zones. So again, so the R1 zone being the yellow on the peninsula, the R2, formerly Central Village in orange, and then the central or core commercial in the dark purple. And then marine development in the light blue. So moving into the next character area, which is the village boundary area. So this is applied to lands outside of the traditional center. There's 3 clusters on the zoning map, and there's a sort of a history of mixed use here, and some more rural uses. And so the new plan allows for a variety of housing types. So now we're talking about the area in green, or the 3 areas in green. And there's only one zone in the boundary area, and that's the residential 3 zone. So this allows single unit dwellings, 2 unit and 3 unit by development permit, and then multi-unit or group dwellings by development agreement. So this is the replacement for what was previous our low density residential zone. Similar, again, we've changed things a little bit, but it's quite reflective of what that zone was. Yep.
Slightly different processes.
And again, just as a reminder, so this is the bright pink is the R3 areas there. The next character area is the North Street area. So this is lands adjacent to North Street or Highway 3, obviously north of the village core, and serves as sort of the main entry points to the village. Again, there's been some mixed use here, so we've had commercial and residential. We have reduced the total area covered by the highway commercial zone, but made some changes to protect commercial uses within the highway commercial zone. So we'll go through these 2 zones. So again, this is the orange area that we're now talking about along North Street. So there's 2 zones here. We have the residential 4 and the highway commercial zone. The residential 4 zone is a new zone. This is not a replacement or a port over of anything from the current plan. So this zone will allow up to multi-units, up to 8 units by development permit. And then anything beyond that would go through development agreement. There are some requirements here for landscaping. So anything that's 3 or more units has a requirement to provide landscaping, planting, and vegetation. And then on-site parking has to be at the side or the rear of the building. So these are elements of what currently is contained in the Highway 3 streetscape plan. So we've pulled a lot of those out and brought them into just straight by permit. So rather than having to go through the site plan approval process, which does take more time and there have been concerns with over the years, what we've tried to do is take some of the key pieces out of that and just say, in order to get your permit, you still have to provide landscaping, but we're not going to put you through a site plan process just to do that. Moving on to the highway commercial zone. So again, in a lot of ways, similar to the core commercial zone, but an expanded list of commercial uses. realizing that these are more highway oriented and less sort of the downtown types of uses. So there are some things here like animal hospitals or vet clinics that we wouldn't be looking to have on Pleasant Street, for example. So a pretty wide range of uses by permit here. We have changed some of these uses under the development agreement column that used to be by permit. So things like automobile body shops, breweries, wineries, kennels, things that may have the potential to cause more disruption. Exactly, we put into that development agreement process. And then just a couple through site plan. And site plan, really, we're in this plan, we're using it as to deal with developments that are, may have a lot of outside space, and it's really about how the elements are laid out on the site, less to do with the building or the number of units or the, the potential disruption. So you can see here service stations and, drive-through uses. Those would be properly done through site plan to make sure there's adequate, turning lanes and spaces for cars to queue, so that hopefully, to avoid some of the issues that we have with some of our existing ones where you get the lines out onto the road and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The highway commercial zone, also similar to the R4 zone, so in that same character area, has that same rule about on-site parking should be located at the side or the rear. There's an exception for accessible spaces, so accessible spaces can be located wherever they're best suited to provide access to the building. Parking areas that have over 20 spaces need to break up the parking lot with natural elements like tree islands. And then we also have that same 25% of the lot must be landscaped in the highway commercial zone. And a portion of that landscaped area has to occur between the building and the highway. So again, these are things that came out of the streetscape plan to try to sort of the beautification piece and try to create that welcoming environment to the core of the village. So on the zoning map here, you can see the R4 in dark red and highway commercial sort of in the violet, light purple color there. We're just about there. So these are just kind of the leftovers. These are the zones that are permitted in all areas. Essentially zones that may be relevant in any character area. And essentially what we have here are the institutional zone, the parks and open space zone, and the ocean infill zone. So the institutional zone, you'll see the permitted uses here. We have, and I guess in the last iteration, made a change. So some of these uses are now going through development agreement. Again, the things that are thought to be potentially more disruptive or need more community consultation. So those are the uses on the right by development agreement, uses on the left by development permit. And then you'll see at the bottom there's an increased setback. So because this zone could go in any character area, when it does occur in a way that it abuts a residentially zoned lot, there's increased setbacks to accommodate for that. Next is the ocean infill zone. I won't go into too much detail here, but this is essentially our efforts to prevent infill of the harbor or of the ocean. That is regulated by the province, and they issue permits for that. And we do have an approach in our current plan to allow infill by development agreement, but over the years, there's been a number of cases where it's happened. And once it happens, it's very hard to sort of undo it. We're going to court to try to undo it. Or you just live with it. So what I've attempted to do with this iteration of the plan is just disincentivize infill to an extent that if somebody legally gets a permit to do it from Department of Natural Resources, they can still do it, but we're going to make it so that the land is as unusable as possible, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. So essentially the only thing as of the date of this bylaw, whenever we get to approval, our GIS techs they'll take the ordinary high water mark at that date, and that will become a GIS layer that we'll use to reference. And then anything that extends beyond that, any land that extends beyond that, which would have been created through infill, will automatically pick up this ocean infill zone. Mm-hmm. And it basically, as you see, the only thing you can build on this zone is a wharf or a slipway. We didn't feel we could completely stop somebody from accessing.
If you own ocean on property, you can't have a wharf or slipway with pipe.
Right, exactly. But what we have done is we've made some specific efforts to say that infilled land would not be counted towards any of your setbacks, so you wouldn't be able to move your building closer, because, all of a sudden we have an extra 20 feet, all of those kind of things. So that's what I've said. We've gone away from regulating infill because it really is more of a provincial issue, but our attempts are going to be to make it so that all you could really use it for is, sitting out some lawn chairs, but you're not going to be able to build on it, and it's not going to give you a real advantage in the rest of the use of your existing property.
Just a question.
Yep.
Allowing the war, would you be able to have a building like is in the,
Boathouse?
boathouse, like where the Lido is, like that type of building?
Um,
Because that could be quite
Right.
obstructive to a view.
Yeah, no,
Larger.
Yeah, I would say no, because wharves and slipways would be, so you'd have to go back to wherever the line was after the infill, and then you could probably build your boathouse in the waterfront zone or whichever residential zone you're in. But yeah, we have, and there is language in this bylaw that talks to that. So if you have a lot that's split zone, which we've come across before over the years, we have some language in here that says, if you do have a lot that's split zone, for example, and you have your house in one, and then the ocean infill zone, any accessory structures like a boathouse wouldn't be able to go across the zone boundary. So I think we've got that covered.
Tied up, because
Yeah.
it wasn't the board that created the public dissatisfaction.
Right.
I think it was the building
The
that
building.
blocked
Yeah,
the view,
right.
or boathouse or whatever.
That's right, yeah, so this would essentially be that, no structures other than the wharf or the slipway itself, so, yeah. Anything would have to be back on the property, that's right. So,
Maybe we should mention Worley Park becoming part.
yes, yeah, absolutely. So we had, thank you. That is, if we, Amelia, sorry, you can just scroll back to wherever the map was last, the zoning map.
Yes, because we put some restrictions on that.
That's right, yeah, so we have this, there we go, perfect. So you will see right in the middle there, that bright green, so those are the Worley Park parcels that we've now rezoned to parks and open space to, I think, better reflect the use and the intended future use of those lots. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Okay, so now you need to go away and do that.
So I'll go work on a little policy, and bring that back, and then maybe we'll go through these options at that point. Is that?
Well, we're going to go through the first reading, I hope.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks, sir. Thank you.
We're going to take a 10-minute break, people. That'll give him a little more time.